Hey everyone, Ryan Young, Kam Jiu-Jitsu. I hope you're doing well. Sitting next to me is one of our instructors here in our Flower Mound campus, Mike Mitchell. Been with us since 2017, around. Yep, and you're a purple belt. Yep, and many of you have met his wife, physical therapist, Jenny, the redhead. She's been on a couple of videos over the years, but she's our more senior member because as we always joke about, she's the more valuable of the two.
I know, that's true. Hey, I'm proud for you to say that. That's awesome.
So Michael has been asking me a while now, hey, he wants to interview me. I'm like, okay. So we're just going to kind of get started with that, and don't know what you're going to cover, don't know any of the questions he's going to ask, and we'll see if I don't mess it up. All right?
Yeah, it's one of those things. You've got to show your audience knows a lot about your school, and they know a lot about Dave Kama and Rickson, but we never get to hear about you, and so it's hard to talk about yourself. So I just wanted to start off by asking, let's start from the beginning. When was the first year you started training?
Well, I thought it was '89, and for the and the thing is, you don't start, or at least I didn't get into this knowing what was laying ahead. I just wanted to do it at the time because some friends of mine at the gym had mentioned it to me. So I did. And I thought it was '89 because a friend of mine told me it was '89. And some of you know a black belt, especially if you're at Gracie University, you know a black belt named Todd Tanaka, he's a few years younger than I am. He was the one that was taking his private right before mine on Tuesdays at Helson Gracie's house in the garage. And I just spoke to him literally last week, and we're just talking about way back when. And I don't know if it was '89, it might have been '90. So, yeah, my bad. So instead of 36, it might be 35 years. So,
man. So you started at Helson's, and where was that school located?
So he had privates at his house, and he had group classes at one of the gymnastics rooms at the University of Hawaii Sports Complex.
So what did classes look like? Let's talk about the privates first. A private at the house, what was a typical flow of a private like? Did he introduce the lesson? Did you come to him with things that you needed to work on? Was it all just basics?
It was all him. I would just show up and pay, and he would teach me what he wanted to teach me. And even when I was a blue belt, I wasn't so, I don't know if arrogant's the word, but maybe I didn't feel like I was knowledgeable enough to tell him what it was I needed to learn. And it's a little difficult in today's world because people are better consumers today than I was back then. And when I say that, I mean people come in today seem to know what they want to learn. I want to learn half guard, or I want to learn berimbolo, or I want to learn how to get out of this and that. Whereas with me, it was just, I don't know, what do you teach me today? And that's what I would do. And I never did question, I never did suggest, I just did what I was told. And Dave was also that way, as our conversations about his past went on as well.
So that's the privates. What did a group class typically look like with Helson? Did he have junior instructors? Was it just him?
So he had one, I guess we'd call him a junior instructor now, guy by the name of Romulo Barros, who when I started was still a purple belt. Was just finishing up his purple belt and was just getting to brown belt. He had come up from Brazil. I think he had trained at Gracie Umaita, and he'd been there the whole time, so he knew the whole family. And when the Gracies came up, he had come up as well. I think he might have gone to California first and then ended up in Hawaii because he wanted to surf, and that's why Helson ended up in Hawaii, from what I understand. So that was a junior instructor, but other than that, Helson would walk in about a half an hour after we got our warm-up started because we had a good 30-minute warm-up, kind of like what we do now. And right when the warm-up is done, Helson would walk in and he'd just be sitting and he'd be taking attendance. He had his little notebook and he would jot everything down. So he knew when we came to class and how many classes we came to and all that. But other than that, that was just really it. Just Romulo led the warm-ups. Maybe led the self-defense concept, but then Helson would take over after that.
So, as you said, a very similar format to what we do here. You had your warm-ups, roughly 30 minutes-ish, and then you moved into self-defense from there, and then that usually led to what we would call the ground game. Correct. Or just a basic jiu-jitsu.
Well, it could be anything on the ground. that Helson would teach, and I don't know how he would determine what he would teach. Nobody ever asked. He just came in and taught, and that's what it was. And just like we do today, the last 30 minutes was your positional sparring. And then we'd stay late because there was no reason for us to have to get out early. And we would just stay till whenever the last guy went home, and we just roll.
How long were you at Helson's?
Well, from when I started until May of '92, when I got out of college, and then I moved to California, and I moved to LA. And so it was either 3 years or 2 years. I was a blue belt, and I think I had 1 or 2 stripes on my belt when I left Hawaii. I want to say 2 stripes.
And did Helson stripe white and blue belt, or just the blue?
Just blue. No stripes for white at all.
So, which is probably kind of our same tradition of where that came from.
Well, when I moved to California and I was at the Gracie Academy with Rickson Gracie, it was the same thing. They never striped white belts there either. And then about 6 months later, I was over at Hickson's place, and he never striped white belts either. Everybody striped the blue belts, and everybody striped the purple belts as well as the brown belts, but not the white belts.
Well, so you went from Hawaii to LA. So what did your training look like there, roughly 92?
Yeah, so May of '92, when I moved to California, I was trained at Gracie Academy, and I was used to paying, with Helson, I paid him $80 a month, right? Sounds pretty cheap now for Helson.
Yeah.
And his privates were $40 for 30 minutes, so $80 an hour. So I had a weekly private, and I had my group classes, so I was spending about $220 or so. But I was living at home, so I didn't have to pay for the roof over my head. I had to pay for everything else. I basically spent all my money doing jiu-jitsu lessons. And when I moved to California, I now had to support my apartment as well as trying to survive. So I couldn't afford to spend that much. But from what I remember, it was $120 a month for twice a week, and it was $180 for 3 times a week. So what I did was I just enrolled in the twice a week, and that's when I went around to other places to see if I could get some extra training time in. I went to a judo studio, didn't like that. Went to a traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu studio at the Y, didn't like that either. So then Fabio Santos had just moved down to Southern California, and he was teaching a couple of classes a week. So he and I had developed a friendship. So I asked him if there's any way that I could go talk to Horian or Hoist to try to get another day a week, because 2 wasn't enough, and I wasn't having an easy time finding an alternative because there really was none. Well, I take it back. There was the Machado School that was in existence, the RCJ Machado School, but I was specifically told by Helson, because I knew there was another school as well as his brother's school, and I called Helson and said, hey, I'm having a rough time getting 4 days a week on the mat, because I had 3 at Helson's in my private. I said, I'm only getting 2. I said, what do I do? And he says, well, you can train at any of my brother's academies. And I said, okay. He says, but if you go to the Machado School, I'll disown you.
Oh.
And, I saw Helson once or twice after that in my entire lifetime, but I still remember those words to this day. And I have nothing against the Machados. In fact, there was a brief moment in time while I was still living in California that the school that I was training at was being taught, all the classes were being taught by Hadra Machado, who I liked a lot. He was a great guy, probably still is. But that wasn't my call. I didn't go to his school. It was just so happened the school I was at, they brought him in. So I ended up, learning a little bit from him, not all that much. Only because the jiu-jitsu was just so different. I just felt like it was a brand new art to me, and I didn't want to go in a different direction. I wanted to continue on the path that I was already on. So, long story, that was kind of it.
So what was the class format like in SoCal versus over in Hawaii?
So at Hickson's Academy, it was exactly the same as it was at Helson's Academy. At Gracie Torrance, it was just top of the hour, every hour. And we didn't have really any warm-ups, so to speak, in class. It was warm up yourself, stretch before Hoist or Fabio walks in, and they go and teach a lesson. And then right at the top of the hour, class is over.
So similar format, warm up followed by self-defense instructions, and then ground again? or was it?
Well, it was just an hour class, so the warm-up was very compressed. But yes, we would still do the self-defense and the ground, and then do the drilling. But it was just in a very compressed time frame. It was 60 minutes versus the 2 hours that I was used to.
So at this time, when did Rickson's teaching kind of move into your life?
So about 3 or 4 months later, I was always looking for Rickson because he was still in the doors. You know, they had these at Gracie, the original Gracie Torrance on Carson Street. They had offices that were set up, but they weren't really offices. They were mat rooms. So they were 10 by 10 mat rooms, and each of them had their own. So Horian had his own, Hoyce had his own, and Rickson had his own. So I saw that on the door, and I thought, okay, Rickson's still coming around, but every time I come, he's never here. So I would ask, when is Rickson going to be in next? And they said, oh, he just kind of comes in whenever. And I'm thinking, is he scheduled to teach? They said, no, he's not. Well, unbeknownst to me, he was already in West LA at his old Pico Boulevard place teaching during the day. And then, I'm sorry, one of my friends told me where it was. Actually gave me a number to call. And that was the number of the studio. And I had spoken to somebody over there, and I said, you know, when are your classes? He told me it's only in the mornings on like Monday, Wednesday, Friday or something. So I was working, you know, market hours at the time, so I couldn't do it. And then probably in about September, October, by one stroke of luck, we had a big project at the money management firm I was at, and we had to run 24-hour shifts. So I was given a graveyard I was given the swing shift from 3 to 11. That meant I could go to the day classes at Rickson's, and that's how I started training at Rickson's. And then once that period of time at my working place ended, Rickson had started evening classes. So I was one of the few students that went to evening classes at his place while it kind of ramped up. But his day class was the bigger class.
So roughly what year was that?
That was in 92.
That was 92?
Yeah, that was probably October of 92. A lot of you have seen a video that was put up by the Gracie Academy, and it was a picture of Rickson training no-gi with, you know, a few people. And I was the one that was sitting on the thumbnail, right? And I had hair back then.
A lot of hair, almost a high top.
Yeah.
It was impressive.
Yeah, I hadn't had hair before. And I think I was wearing a yellow t-shirt. I was one sitting against a wall, and that was the thumbnail. And I guess that's the proof that I was around since that long. And that happened in the summer of 92, because every summer we put no-gi on. And Rickson would kind of come in just to train, to not to beat up people, that wasn't his style, but him just to train and just to get more bodies in there. And it's funny because if you look in that room, you know, you had everybody all against the walls in the room, and the mats on the wall like this, and there were probably 10, 15 future black belts that were in that room at that time. And the one that he spent the most time training with, you can tell it's him because the pants weren't tied, the strings were just dangling around, and that was Dave Kama.
Yeah, Dave's had a lot of good stories of training in that location over the years.
Yeah.
So with Rickson,
Yeah.
did you train at his home or primarily at that studio on the west side?
I never did train at his home. I'm not sure where he lived at that time, but later on he ended up moving to Palisades. And there were times when people would go, especially for privates, they'd go meet him over at the house in Palisades. Whereas when I did a private with Rickson, I did it at the academy.
So walk me through a Helson Gracie class, you know, starting with, you know, walking in, intro, when he arrived, who led what. What did that look like for you?
So for the most part, the evening class that I went to, Rickson was already there, and he would, you know, whenever time would come for class to start, which was pretty much on time, he would run the warm-ups with us and do it the way that we do it today. Every once in a while, his assistant, who's Luis Heredia, we all called him Limao. I guess that's supposed to be Lemon, I'm not sure. But sometimes Limao would run the warm-ups. But for the most part, Rickson would run the warm-ups, and it would be about 30 minutes, just like it was in Hawaii. And then the next 30 minutes, he'd go over a self-defense concept. Next 30 minutes, he'd segue into a ground concept. And the last 30 minutes, we'd just be training and sparring, positional sparring, meaning whatever he went over in class that day, that's what we had to do in our sparring. We didn't have free rolling, from what I remember. Free rolling was done in your own time.
Before or after class?
Either.
Okay.
Yeah, I would meet, there's a black belt over at Gracie University now. He's been there probably 20 years. His name is Chris Saunders, another Dirty Dozen. and he was a brown belt at the time, and he and I would train a lot together because we were about the same weight. He was probably a good 3-4 inches taller than me, but we were about the same weight, and strength-wise about the same too. So he and I would sometimes, just the two of us, would train for an hour or so. Sometimes it was before class, sometimes it was after class, sometimes because in lieu of class, because maybe an instructor didn't show. And I never minded because he was a brown belt and I was either a high blue or a purple by then. I'm not sure anymore. But I did get my purple from Rickson and another couple of stripes before I left Rickson's academy.
So in terms of the class and the structure, was it only Rickson teaching at that time, or was it Saunders helping or anyone else?
No, it was just Rickson.
Strictly him.
It was just Rickson. And that's about the time when the Vale Tudo in Japan started happening. And then that's when Limao would start taking over and teaching more. It's because Rickson just wasn't around. He was training or resting. So yeah, but prior to that, Rickson taught all the classes, all the morning classes and all the evening classes.
Wow. So when did you depart that academy, and then where did you head after that?
Shortly, I don't know if it's shortly, maybe 6 months to a year after he started fighting and stopped coming around during my classes. That's when a couple of friends of mine went over to went to Kenny Gabrielson's place, and Kenny Gabrielson is, I guess, the second non-Brazilian to get his black belt in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and he got his black belt after having been one of the original garage guys in California. He had moved down. He was a fireman down in Orange County, and I guess the drive to and from Orange County got to be a little long. Traffic started to really pick up. So he ended up asking Rickson for a referral down near Orange County that he could train with. So he referred him to his cousin, Helson Gracie, Reylson. And Helson is on the other side of the family, but he was also taught by Elio, and he's, I guess, Carlos Gracie Sr.'s fourth son. I think it goes Carson, Hobson, Hazen, and then Helson, so the fourth one. And then he's also Rodrigo Gracie's father as well. And I guess there's one other brother, I don't remember his name though. But that's who Kenny Gabrielson got his from, because Helson was down in Corona del Mar, which is next to Newport Beach, and got his black belt from him. And then he had his own academy for a while, and that's when a couple of friends of mine had found out about him, because they as well were wanting to train under Rickson, but Rickson wasn't there teaching. And, very short-sighted on our part. But both of those two are black belts, and they're both pretty spectacular black belts today. So I went that way, and I went over to Kenny's place, and Kenny and I got to be great friends. In fact, he and I, we still communicate every once in a while. He's up in Colorado now. But yeah, so that's where I went.
Wow. So at Kenny's, walk me through. I like the comparison of training at all the different locations, right? You've got a lot of history and a lot of experience under some phenomenal instruction. So walk me through training at Kenny Gabrielson's.
So Kenny, being not a Gracie himself, he did things a little bit different in the way he had, executed some of the concepts and techniques. Didn't quite do it the way Rickson did, but was effective nonetheless. I mean, he used to smash me all the time. And Kenny would train in every class. Well, he was a fire captain, so whenever he wasn't in the firehouse, he would be in class training. But he would also have mats at the firehouse, so there were times we could go over there and train as well. Classes were not really set up the same way. It was a much smaller studio. We didn't do the active warm-up. So we did, actually, I take it back, we did. When I got there and Kenny would have me run the class or run the warm-ups, I'd always do it the way we did it at Rickson's. I don't think they did it that way previous till me getting there, but that's just the way I did it. Don't know if they still do it that way or not. And then Kenny had a little different angle in the way he did jiu-jitsu, because he was probably, in my mind, one of the first MMA guys, because prior to him taking jiu-jitsu, he was already one of those black belts under Paul Vunak, who was one of Dan Inosanto's fighters. And Kenny was one of Paul Vunak's fighters. And then he did the jiu-jitsu after that. I think Kenny started his jiu-jitsu probably in the early mid-'80s, being that he was right after Craig Kuka and getting his black belt. I think he's in 8th degree now. Yeah.
So you were midway through purple when you started training at Professor Gabrielson's.
Yeah.
Okay. So where did that take you? Did he issue you your brown belt?
He did.
Okay.
And I guess some of you have looked at some of my older videos, know that I got my brown belt twice. And the first time I got it was in the late 90s from Kenny Gabrielson. And, you know, it's funny because I knew brown belts from Rickson's. And he then, you know, gave me my brown belt. You know, I don't know how long it was at his place, probably at least a year or so. And told me he had a brown belt for me in the desk drawer. And, you know, it wasn't like a formal thing where, you know, he stands you up and puts the belt on you. He just said it's in your drawer. You know, just go and grab it when you leave today. And I just said, okay. And it was very different, right? I ended up not grabbing the belt. I ended up just leaving it there. Never did claim it. And
why? What would...
I don't know. I don't know. Because I guess my standard was still Rickson. Rickson, Helson, Horine, Hoist. And I just didn't feel right getting a belt from, not that wasn't from one of them, only because prior to all of that, that was my experience in jiu-jitsu. And to them, to me, they were my teachers, even though Kenny was now my new teacher. And I mean, I did, you know, he did stripe my purple belt. He made, think, the 3rd or the 4th stripe on my purple belts, And then, but when it came for the brown, being that he didn't put it on me, I just felt kind of weird going to the desk and grabbing it and one day putting it on. I didn't feel it was kind of official. But because of that, you know, that's where I feel really horrible, because he gave me the brown belt. He didn't give it to me the way, you know, I was used to getting it put onto me, kind of like the way we do here.
Yeah.
He just said the belt's there along with your certificate, so, you know, go get it. And yeah, I wasn't, you know, I'm a go-getter, but not for that. You know, but so I just kept wearing my purple belt. And, you know, later on, you know, I did talk to Kenny about it and apologize, you know, that I ended up getting the brown belt again, even though I should have worn it the moment he gave it to me.
So how long did you train with Professor Gabrielson?
About 3-4 years. About that. About 3 or 4 years.
So this puts
really
us mid to late 90s.
It puts us in the late 90s.
Okay.
Yeah, late 90s, maybe 2000.
Okay. So walk us through when you actually received your brown belt. Who was that from?
So the second time I received it, it was in 2007, and it was from Brad Jackson. And Brad Jackson was the first Helson Gracie black belt in Southern California. Prior to that, all the black belts were up in Northern California. So Brad was the first one that Helson gave down in Southern Cal. And I was training at Brad's school. Brad was a friend of mine. We were at Gracie Torrance at the same time. We were at Rickson's at the same time. We were at Kenny's at the same time. And then Brad decided he wanted to run things his own way, and Brad and I were close friends. And he lived closer to me than Kenny's studio was, so I ended up just going to Brad's place. But it was during that time, I was with Brad for 10 years, but it was during that time that I hardly ever trained because I lived in LA County, he was in Orange County. And it was just such a long drive because I lived and worked in LA County, and you know, having to after work drive down to Orange County to train was just really tough. So I didn't train as much as I wanted to. So over that 10-year period, that was when I was a purple belt, and many of you know I was a purple belt for 14 years. Really, I was a purple belt for about 3 or 4 years, right? But when Kenny gave it to me, but being that I'd wear it, I kept wearing purple belt. Yeah, I didn't train much for 10 years. I can't say I gave up on jiu-jitsu because never in my mind did I give up on jiu-jitsu, but I did see that the art was changing, and that's where the sport jiu-jitsu game was starting to pick up. They're starting to do stuff, you know, like with the lapels, wrapping it around, and it's, you know, starting to do did they start doing De La Riva then? No, it was a little bit later. No, De La Riva they were. It was the Berimbolo that came a little bit later on.
And this was happening in the academies where you were training?
Yeah, they were playing around with it in Brad's place. Brad was very open to that, to the other stuff, whereas I was less so. You know, I had an idea of what I wanted to learn because of what you know, my first, you know, 8 years,
right,
was training only with Elio's sons. So to me, that's to the point where I'm now, you know, born and bred Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and I didn't really want to do the sport stuff. It really didn't appeal to me. But part of the reason why I hardly ever trained too, because I saw that Jiu-Jitsu was going that way, and I didn't want to learn that, and I didn't really have the ability, location-wise, to go to one of Elio's sons.
Wow. So from that, during your break, did you do any drop-ins? Did you ever train at places or compete or do anything of that nature?
So I had mats in my house. I had 10 by 10 mats at my house and that I would fold up in a pile. They were the folding accordion style mats. And I just kept them in my living room. And whenever friends would come over, I'd just open them up and we'd train in my living room. So I did have ample opportunities to train because I was one of the few people that I knew that had mats. So I could always say, hey, so-and-so, do you want to train when the academy's closed? They're like, yeah, sure. So they'd come over to my house and, we'd train. So, that was for those of you who don't go buy mats.
So you stayed active and you stayed motivated and hungry during this time. What were you waiting for in terms of finding another location or an academy?
I really didn't know. Brad was my teacher, but he was showing me stuff that was working for him and that he wanted to show me, and me not wanting to normally question my instructor. I just learned what they tell me to learn. In my mind, it didn't feel right learning the sport stuff. It's not that because he could do all the traditional stuff. He just expanded his horizons, and he was like a walking encyclopedia of jiu-jitsu. I mean, he could recall things just like that. And whereas with me, I'd have to think about it because I have a much smaller bandwidth for going wide. I can go deep, but I don't go wide too well. And even to this day, there's a lot of new stuff that I see, like, oh, that looks pretty cool, but do I want to learn it? Nah. My thinking is, how can I not let that happen to me instead? Which means, go back to the defense or go back to the base, and how do I ensure I keep my base, or how do I use what I already know to thwart what happened, what they're doing, or how do I use what I know to not let that happen to me?
So when did you pick up, not full-time training, but training more frequently after this break?
So in 2008, that was after I had my meniscus and my ACL repaired. I got those in judo. I got those torn in judo. Then once it got fixed, I went back to Brad, and then we were training, and he gave me my brown belt. I think I might have already had it by then. Actually, no, he gave me my brown belt after I came back from judo, came back from the injury. So it was around 2007, 2008, I'm not sure. And what's the question again?
Walking us through your return to more frequent training.
Yeah. So I started taking privates from Brad. By then, Brad wasn't running his academy anymore. Instead, he was just doing privates during the week. And on Saturdays, he had his students come over and they would just train. He would do some privates. He had his whole garage was a mat. So he'd be on one side teaching a private, and then everybody else would be training. So I would do privates during the week, and then I would do the Saturday training session at his house. And I got to be more regular. Plus, I had another business that I had started with a buddy of mine who I had introduced him to jiu-jitsu when I was a purple belt at Hickson's. And he had switched. He also went to Kenny Gabrielson's, and he switched over to another instructor up in Northridge named Darkanyan Bagby, who is one of the original garage guys as well, spectacular black belt. But I would, that particular person and we worked together, so every Friday we would train at his house because he had mats. So I would go to judo twice a week. I'd go to class. I'd go to Brad's place on the Saturday, and I'd go and train with this business partner. So I would get 4 days on the mat pretty much per week, but 2 of it is in judo and 2 of it was jiu-jitsu. So I got to be more regular at that time, and this was probably about early 2008. At the same time, I also had private students by then in my garage. So I had 2 of them that I was teaching on whatever available time I had. So I was by then I was on the mat 5 days a week.
Wow. So what motivated you to start training judo? Because we've inserted judo in there during that early 2000s to 2008 period.
Because I've always seen the value of judo, knowing how to get people off balance, how to disrupt their base, and then how to take them down. I also understood the value of being able to land and land without getting hurt. and we did throws, we did judo, not in the judo sense of the word today, but we did judo in the old traditional Gracie Jiu-Jitsu with Helson, with Rickson, with Hoist, with Horian. We all did it. It kind of stopped when I went to Kenny Gabrielson's, but at Kenny Gabrielson's, he was doing the Muay Thai, the knife fighting, the stick fighting, and the kickboxing, which is all fun. So I started playing around with that, but the reason why I took jiu-jitsu way back when was because I was in Kempo karate. I didn't like getting my leg kicked and getting punched, and I thought that's bullshit. Yeah. So when we started again over at Kenny's place, then like I said, I thought it was cool and it was fun, but it's not something I want to do every day. So unfortunately, I didn't really learn a lot because that was 25 years ago. I mean, I could have pretty good at that stuff now, but I just concentrate on the jiu-jitsu part.
So you get your brown belt, excuse me.
Yeah.
2008 from Brad, around 2008,
yeah.
Shortly after your return from your surgery. Where do we go next in terms of the timeline?
So I would just train in my garage. I'd go to Brad's garage, and then my business partner at the time, and then I had my private students. And then one day I had Howard Liu, who owned Howard HCK Kimonos. He was one of the first non-Brazilians to create Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gis in the United States. I think he even predated John Owano, who's also one of the early ones. Anyway, Howard and I, he came over to the house, and he is a big dude, very tall. But he also started jiu-jitsu, but he ended up training with, I think, Rico Chaparral over at that place in Redondo Beach. I can't remember what it's called anymore. Randy Couture was also part of that group as well. But he'd come over. He'd only done no-gi, so I thought, I can do no-gi too. And while we were training, he would, I'm playing guard, right? Got used to playing that game. And he would just, punch my forehead. He says, I got you. I'm like, oh, damn. So I'd change a little bit, and then he, boom, I got you again. And, this is a guy who wasn't particularly good, but all he did was train no-gi and, in that fashion. And whereas I was doing mostly gi and sometimes no-gi. And I thought, okay, Ryan, you're starting to play too much of the sport mentality game. So I just needed to find my center again. So I had told my garage students that I was looking for Dave Kama. And I didn't know where he was because, back then, this is just the internet was starting already by the first 5-10 years or so, but unlisted numbers were still unlisted. You couldn't pull them up. There's no such thing as Facebook or anything like that. And even if there was, it wouldn't matter because Dave doesn't do that stuff. I would have never found them anyway. But what happened was a gentleman named Jason Selva, who runs a school in East LA, he had dropped in at Dave's academy, or Dave was training. Somehow he found Dave, right? And dropped in and did a blog post on it. And one of my garage students found it because they were all into going up to the boards and reading stuff about jiu-jitsu, whereas I didn't care about that. So he said, hey, I found Dave Kama, and that's how I got back in touch with Dave. And I started training with Dave ever since. Because Dave, I really liked. He was a Rickson guy. He was a Horian and Hoist guy first, and when Rickson moved to the U.S. in like 88, 89, then schedules-wise, it worked better with Dave and Rickson, and also personality-wise, it worked better for the two of them. So Rickson became Dave's teacher from that time on. And Dave, to me, was always the best guy that I've ever trained with who wasn't named a Gracie. And it's because he spent all his time learning from Rickson, and he could learn the way Rickson taught. I had a harder time learning the way Rickson taught at the time. But Dave learned really well, and he used it to his advantage when he would train with me, and he just smashed the heck out of me. And nobody else did it. So my thought was always I'd like to get back and train with Dave. So years later, I was looking for him when I left Rickson's. I was actually looking for Dave, but he was down in Orange County by then, and I wasn't living in Orange County, so I knew it would be a drive to get to him. Yeah. But years later, when I'm living in Orange County, that's when I find Dave, and I went over to Dave's place probably middle of 08.
So what was the total gap in time, right? You kind of reunited with Dave and his teaching in 08. When was the first time you got to train and meet Dave?
Oh, shoot. I met Dave in 92.
Yeah, so that was the last time as well? Or you trained for
No, I've seen Dave a few times. I didn't see him a lot. But Dave and I bonded because, we kind of look alike, being that we're, both Asian Hawaiian mixes. And, you grow up in Hawaii and you know what a person from Hawaii looks like. And when I met him at Gracie Torrance for the first time, I hear it's this 4-stripe purple belt I've never seen before. I look at him and I thought, oh, familiar face. And I go, what's your name? He says, Dave. And I said, Ryan. And I go, are you from Hawaii too? He goes, well, I am, but I was raised in Sacramento. So then that's when he and I, that was our first, acquaintance point. And but he would show me stuff, and he'd show me how to, he showed me how to get out of gift wrap. He showed me a few other things, and I never asked him to teach me stuff, but he would show them to me, and I really appreciated it. But the way he trained, it was just so heavy. There's so much pressure that I was just stuck everywhere, and I loved that. I'm like, how did you do that? Because he wasn't using strength, because I could tell it was all his weight and the way he placed his weight. It made it feel like strength, but it wasn't, because he was totally relaxed the whole time. I'm huffing and puffing and trying to move and get out of it. Tap, 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 and he's just going, okay, keep going, oh, keep going, keep going. Every time he says keep going, because he tapped me. So when Rickson was fighting, and I knew he was going to be fighting for a while. You look at, he's the GOAT. He's going to keep fighting as long as he wants to.
Right.
And I'm not going to see him in the academy, so there's no sense in me being at Rickson's academy if Rickson's not teaching. Now, if Dave were teaching, I would have stayed. But Dave was running the Orange County campus by then. And the Orange County campus was just too far for me. I wasn't going to go there. I knew it was Laguna Niguel, and I didn't know where Laguna Niguel was, but I know it was far. So I wasn't going to make it there. And then so Jason Selva did a blog post and pointed out that he's in Irvine. So I called the Irvine racket club that he was at. They said, oh, he's moved back down to Laguna Niguel, which was 20 minutes from where I lived. So I just drove down there, and I saw David. He kind of looked at me. He goes, hey. And so good. He recognized me, and it was good. And I've been with him ever since. And what are we, 2025 now? So it's been a while.
Now, which year did he give you your black belt?
It was March of 2012.
Wow. And you guys, Kam Jiu-Jitsu, the school, it's a beautiful relationship between you and Dave Kama, going off of everything that you've both learned from the Gracie family, specifically Rickson. With that in mind, we've talked about a number of schools, a half dozen different locations and places to train. What's one common thread that each one of them had, right? For those of us that don't have that exposure, I've been Kam Jiu-Jitsu since I started, and that, to me, that's a blessing, because it hasn't been a confusing journey for me. But with you, what's the common thread that you found in all these different locations, from Hawaii all the way through California on?
At least for Helson's, Gracie Academy, Rickson's, and Kenny Gabrielson.
Right.
Jiu-Jitsu wasn't a sport; it was a fight. Right, and it was just a tool to get you to be more proficient in a fight. And even Helson School, if you were in Helson School and you were over 30, you were probably one of about 3 or 4 guys, and you were the old guys. Everybody else is in the 20s. And Rickson School was also a very young school. Gracie Torrance was a very old school, meaning professionals. Kenny Gabrielson's was a relatively young school as well. Brad School, I can't remember too much of the demographics of Brad School because I didn't make it into the class very often. But he did bring in instructors that were more apt to do the sports stuff. So in that one, the old school stuff kind of went away with Hadra Machado, and then later he had 2 other instructors that came in, and they were both on the sports side. They were both from Brazil and primarily the sports side.
So each of the old school locations that you trained at, they all had a very similar format in terms of how you were presented as a student, right? You had your warm-up, your self-defense, then you go into ground game, you had free time to train and roll.
Yeah.
They're all pretty much the same.
Yeah. Although in Brad School, we didn't do the self-defense too much anymore. We did have a light warm-up. But Brad, taught a lot. He would just give you a whole bunch of information, and you just have to kind of take it from there. Kenny Gabrielson had that same concept as well. His thing was, he was basically, he'll throw all the techniques, because they're all good. He'll throw them all up on the wall, and for you, the individual, see what sticks, and that's what you work on. Whereas our philosophy is a little bit different. Right. It's, I'll throw one up in the wall, and you go learn that. All right, you got that? I'll throw another one up on the wall and you go learn it. And if it falls down, pick it back up and we'll learn it again. Because there are concepts that are core that you must know. We call them need to knows. And I need to make sure that you know them before we can go on to the next step.
So we talk about the common thread between all the schools. What were some differences between one academy or school to the next that stuck with you, right? Like, hey, I've not that you were planning on opening your own school back then, but it stuck with you. So then when KAATARO opened, when the Texas location opened and you were here as the lead instructor for this place, what did you pull from each of those schools? Is there anything?
I really didn't pull anything from each of them. It was just, I just did what Dave did once I moved here. I had no plans to open a school, as you know. I just really wanted to train. I didn't want the headache of running a school at the time. But I went to a train at this one place, and it didn't turn out to be, what I was looking for. So called Dave, and Dave says, open a school. So we did.
It worked out in our favor.
Yeah, mine too. It was in retrospect, it was one of the greatest things that's ever happened to me. But I knew that I could always count on Dave and to help me, whatever I need and stuff. And even though our campus in California was very small, when I left, we might have had 10 students. And prior to me coming there, probably had about 4, maybe 5. Dave never taught a lot of people. He never really taught volume. That wasn't his thing. He just wanted to just teach people so you can be his training partner. Yeah. So what I realized, though, was that coming here and teaching, there were a few things that needed to happen. And basically, we just modeled it after, the old Rickson classes. We didn't have a lot of students, so at that time, every class was basically a semi-private. And I could just, make sure that each one of them were doing what they needed to do when they needed to do it. That's really, in my mind, that's the best situation you can have. A very small group that where every one of them need to be, what the next step is for them, and you just, you take the minute to kind of go with them, what they need to do next, and just work on that. I'll be back to you. So I could teach 5 different people and just rotate through, and each of them would get as good as they could possibly get as quickly as they could. As the classes get bigger, it gets to be more difficult to have individual attention, which is why I knew that was going to happen. I never had any idea that it would be small in Texas like the way it was in California. Dave and I had spoken about it, and we developed a business plan, and the goal was to be able to teach as many people as we can Helson Gracie's Jiu-Jitsu, because in both of our opinions, if we don't do it, when Rickson dies, his Jiu-Jitsu dies. And we didn't want that to happen. We don't want that to happen. So what I did was, at the very beginning, at the outset, I thought, okay, I'm not going to be able to be everywhere at once. And I don't know how long I want to do this. Dave and my thinking were that we'd give it 10 years, and after that, we'd just say, forget it, we'll be done. But here we are, 13, 14 years into it now. Huh?
This location turned 10 in October.
October 2013. So this year,
yeah, you're right.
This year would be 12. So when we hit October of 2025, we'll be 12 years.
Wow.
So yeah, our thinking was 10 years and we'll be done. But for me, in order for us to reach our goal of teaching as many people as we could, I needed to teach other people how to be instructors. So, when you guys all got up to a really good blue belt level, and if you had wanted to teach, then I would teach you how to teach. And it's a hands-on method of teaching how to teach, and throwing you out there, go ahead and teach them this today, in my class, right?
Yeah.
And that way I would correct them, and I said, okay, I'd pull you back aside. I said, no, say it this way, or I'd say, watch those 2 over there. You see that? Because I could tell what mistakes are going to happen when, and I'd say, watch them. Boom, there it is. And then if you didn't know, then I would explain to you what just happened. Watch, he'll do it again. All right, so then he'll go and fix it. Or I just go watch them and I go away, because I know that, for instance, I know you'll see it.
As long as I don't hear you say, who taught you that, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Or the head tilt. Those 2 things. Yep, that one. Those 2 things, I know I'm in trouble. But yeah, it's you've caught me a number of times.
Well, yeah, because you're teaching wrong.
I did my best. I would, the best, I think, in terms of your relationship as my professor and I being one of your junior instructors, I would show students, hey, whatever you do, don't do it this way. And inevitably, Professor Ryan could be walking out of a laundry room. He could be changing and coming out of the locker room somewhere. He sees it. And he'll look at me and go, why are you teaching him that way? I'm showing him the rope. Never mind. At some point, I just gave up and thought, you know what? You're right.
And he knows it's a joke because
it is.
He is one of my best instructors. So I know he knows it. But sometimes I just look at it. In my mind, I'm thinking, why are you even bothering to show the wrong way? But I get it,
Yeah.
I never show people my way of teaching. Everybody's way of teaching is different, and I try to nurture what your best way to teach is, your comfort area, so that you teach that way. But let me just show you how to teach it, right?
Absolutely.
And he likes to show whatever you do, don't do it this way. Whereas with me, I just omit it altogether, and I just teach them the correct way. And if they do it the wrong way, it doesn't work. And I'll say, it doesn't work. Why is it not working? They say, well, that's what you showed me. I say, well, no, let's do it again.
Yeah.
And then they'll push the hand a certain way, and then I go, well, that's why, because you're doing this. Like, here's how you're supposed to do it. And then they remember, they go, oh, yeah. And they do it, right? But another way is you just show them the wrong way, and you thwart it, and you say, that's why you don't do it this way, so now go back to it, right? That's one way to do it. And he mentioned, where your hands, or who showed you that, right? So, yeah, who showed you that? That was... because I know what I'm teaching, and I know how I teach it, and I've taught it a million times, so that when they do something a different way, and I know that they know it the correct way, and I see them do it a different way, then the accusation would always be, you're not a purple belt yet, you're not deep in a purple belt, so why are you on YouTube watching stuff, right? That's where it would come from. Who taught you that, right? And that's basically me calling them out. Where your hands, that's another one, because especially when whatever position you're in, if your hands are in the right spot, then the rest of your body will do the right thing that you learned. If your hands need to be here, but your hands are here, then you're going to have no idea what to do. But when I put your hands here, then all of a sudden you go, oh, there it is, and you'll do it correct. So I'd always yell out, where are your hands? Well, the problem was that when I would do that, you got two people training, and when I say, where are your hands, they're both looking at their hands. They're not knowing who I'm speaking to. I'm looking I know who I'm talking to, but it's their job to figure out who I'm talking to, right? But yeah, I'd have to change that. I'd have to start calling names, or what I'll do is I'll put my hands down and I'll say stop, right? And then, funny thing is I'll say stop, and what do they do?
Yeah.
Right? And they move, and then I gotta go, did I say to move? No. And I go, now you can't go back again. Now, because now I'm all irritated, I walk away.
So off camera, I'll admit that I've stopped teaching the wrong way in order to do that. But the reason for me wanting to do this long format interview with you is really, you imitate Dave, who imitates Rickson, right? We imitate you and Dave when he's here, and he comes in once a month and
coming this weekend.
Instruction. That's good to know. The reason for it is you always want to know where you came from. You want to know your history and why you do the things you do. And I think it's important to tell that story. And as you said, your goal is to make sure that whatever you learn from Rickson doesn't die.
Yeah.
And so in order to do that, I want to put information out there. And a lot of that comes from you. You're very much a historian of where we've come from. And so I like hearing that. And it's hard for you as the host of your own podcast in long format to talk about yourself. And so I want your audience to know, as we've learned a lot about the history and why we do the things we do, why we gravitate towards certain techniques, certain class formats, and everything else. I think it's very important, and it gives us a deeper appreciation of the art.
When it comes to jiu-jitsu, I didn't invent it, and neither did Dave. But what I have come to realize is that there are a lot of things that me, myself, I can't make better. I don't have that ability. So Grandmaster Elio taught it one way, and he taught his sons how to do it, and their sons taught their students how to do it. And in order for me to feel like I am best representing their art is to do my best to teach it the way I was taught by them. And Dave is the same way. Now, of course, individual instructors have their own style of teaching, but we're all teaching the same thing with the same goal in mind. And it's good if you have an instructor that's already been through the problems that you're running through, and they can tell you. that type of person you need to teach this way. When I say that type, I mean people, the type of person that learns a certain way, right? Because I always tell all the instructors, right? You learn with your ears, you learn with your eyes, you learn with your body, right? Body is touch. And Rickson was very much a touch teacher. Horian was very much a listen teacher. And Helson, who wasn't all that connected in the way he taught or trained like the way Rickson is, and his English was very bad. He was always he'll show you. And they were all great instructors. Me, myself, I personally tended to gravitate toward the Horian style because he was very articulate. So, those of you who ever watched Helson Gracie teaching, right? That's all Horian Gracie right there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Henner is just, more passionate and more loud. But that entire style, the way, the verbalization, the articulation, that's all Horian Gracie. And, and I learned really well under Horian. I had a hard time learning under Rickson, but I also learned really well under Helson. Because I'm very much, I have to see and I have to hear. But as time has gone on, I've learned how to deal with the touch now, to the point where I've been told, I don't notice it, I've been told by a lot of people that I train with my eyes closed now. Because I don't need to see it, but I have to feel it. And that really I learned from Dave, because Dave can do it all. And that's one of the things that made it that he was such a great teacher for me. It's because he could learn with Rickson doing something to him, and then Rickson would say, okay, now do it back to me. And without saying a word other than do it back to me, Dave will do it. He can learn like that, whereas I can't. All right, Rickson would try to teach me armbar in a private, and he says, all right, do the armbar. And he says, okay, do it like me. And I'm like, and I just wing it, and he goes, no, my friend, that's wrong. Do it again. Here, like this. Okay, do it to me. And it was just getting to be frustration on both sides, because I couldn't figure it out that way. I wasn't geared by touch. And that's why Helson was good with me, because he would once you learn Helson's lingo, you can do it, because his English was very bad, but he said things a certain way, and you knew what he meant over time. And I got a lot of it, hanging out with him every Friday night after class, and I got to know him at a personal level, and I got to be a student. So I understood everything he said, no matter what people go, what are you saying? I'm like, oh, he said this, right? But his students learned that of him. And in Horian, he was just, he'd tell you exactly what to do and why, which is why for me it was such a refreshing thing being taught by Horian. But by the time I got to the academy, he was probably teaching very little. He might have taught 10 classes total while I was there. And by then he was just in his office working, or just doing privates with, Al Bundy. So I didn't get as much learning time from Horian as I wanted to. But I think I've taken, everything from them, and just try to do what we're doing. But for us, it's all about Rickson Gracie's jiu-jitsu, not Horian's, not Helson's. It's Rickson's.
I think you and Dave coming up with the curriculum you've started helps, right? Because it applies to all types.
Yeah.
So if I'm a visual person, I can watch footage that we have of it. If I'm an auditory person, I can listen to that same footage. I can listen to instruction, and then again, nothing's going to be coming to class, getting hands-on training. Yeah. And so I think that's really a lot of motivation for why I'm asking the questions I'm asking today, is just trying to piece together for the audience, for myself and the rest of the instructors, just where does it all come from? And I think that's important, again, for us to know. But I really do appreciate you sitting down with me. I know this was unrehearsed. It's our first time interacting in front of a camera in this way, outside of the Thanksgiving drive,
Yeah.
every year.
It's always better like this anyway. I'm very bad with rehearsed things.
Me too.
We used to have a social media guy who wanted me to do certain things and say it a certain way, and he'd give me a script, and I'd look at it, and I'd try my best. I'd do it 10 times, and I'd just say F it, and I'd toss it, and I said, and I'll just wing it. And with all the videos that I've done on the channel, every single one, I winged it.
I still remember the first Starbucks videos where your camera's literally getting blown over by the wind because you're sitting outside, and it just sounds like you're in a wind tunnel with the mic.
Oh, yeah.
So, man, we've come a long way.
Well, even before that, when I was sitting on the one in 2499 in Florida, the one you're talking about is the one on 3040 and Morris.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, I used to, at another Starbucks over there, I'd have my camera and I'd be talking like this, into it. The first maybe 2 videos I did this way, because in my mind I make fun of everybody who's doing selfies and and they're doing videos of themselves, and I just think, what knuckleheads, right? And then here I am now doing videos, and and I know to myself, I'm thinking, Ryan, you look like such a knucklehead, right? But I'm going, but I don't want to have to say this again, the story that I'm talking about in the video for the 8th time in front of students, for the first time for a student who just started asking me. And I know that all the students, they're all polite, all the older students, that were at our first location, they'd hear the same story 4th, 5th, 6th times. And they're polite as can be, even though I'm taking up class time to answer these questions. And finally I just thought, I don't want to do a disservice to them, making them hear it 20 times. So let me put in a video, and when people ask, I say, oh yeah, it's all in videos, go to Kam Jiu-Jitsu. And that's how it all started, was just so I could get information out to the students. And then when we had that first belt video that I did in my office, lighting was very bad. Everything was done with dry erase markers, me drawing belts on the thing, and sound was bad, but that's still our top video. And we redid it in a much better fashion, and that video is also doing well, but not nearly as well as that. But yeah, it's all unrehearsed. It's just all off the top of my head, and this is all my history. You may have others that say, well, it's actually different. Well, it's like, well, yeah, maybe in your examination of it, perhaps, but not mine. This is just what I went through.
Well, for my part, I appreciate you sitting down with me, answering questions. It's helpful for me to know. So with that, I'll let you close with your audience.
Cool. Well, everyone, if you made it this far, please go ahead and click the like button. I'd really appreciate that. And if you're not already, please subscribe, because only about 20% of our viewers actually are subscribers. And if you're a subscriber and you hit the bell, then you will get these notifications whenever I have a video out. And this year I tried to make a change, and I did a lot of videos this year so far, whereas I was slacking off last year. So I'm trying to turn a new leaf, and I'm trying to be a better person and try to get more information out to you guys. Also, I've got another channel. The link is going to be below, or it should be. It's videos that I put together to my younger self, and I think it might be under BJJ Professor, which is one of my older YouTube channels. Also, if you want to speak to me one-on-one, and you want some advice on the personal stuff, as well as how to run your school, and you want to get some questions, stuff that I went through, I'd be happy to answer. Just go ahead and hit me on the clarity link, and that's also down below. And that's all I got for you guys, and I want to thank you for watching this. And you can visit us at one of our 2 locations. We have the one we're sitting right now is Flower Mound, Texas, Kam Jiu-Jitsu DFW. And we also have one in Irvine, California. That's Kam Jiu-Jitsu Irvine, and that's where Dave is until this weekend. He'll be here, so don't bother going on that day. That's all I got for you. Take care. Happy training. Bye now.